and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
I will call officers out. If we have bad officers, I will call them out.
City Council members confirm Larry Snelling is Chicago's next police superintendent. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and more.
Get ready to stomp and squash as the state faces a new invasive species.
It can trigger issues that can be costly in the long term.
The problem of underground climate change and why it's giving the Loop that sinking feeling.
I hope that we begin to see the cultural impact of artists with disabilities of all kinds.
And we introduce you to the Chicago recipient of the Midwest Award for Artists with Disabilities.
Now some of today's top stories. It is official. Larry Snelling is sworn in as Chicago's superintendent of police. He was unanimously confirmed by Chicago City Council. Snelling has spent 30 years in the Chicago Police Department, most recently as chief of counterterrorism. He is an Englewood native and was selected to the post by Mayor Brandon Johnson after the brand new Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability came up with 3 finalists. Snelling says police can't solve violent crime without community buy-in, and he offered this about police accountability.
When it comes to accountability for my officers, anybody will tell you this: I hold officers accountable. I will call officers out. If we have bad officers, I will call them out. But when our officers are held accountable, they have to be held accountable fairly.
A group of neighbors from around the city and county are calling on Mayor Brandon Johnson and Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle to demand that the federal government foot the bill for the city's migrant crisis.
Don't you dare think of raising the taxes on working families and small businesses in our city and our county to pay for Joe Biden's migration mess.
The group, called the Chicago Cook County Coalition for Humane Migrant Management, argues the federal government should cover the hundreds of millions of dollars needed to care for the 15,000 migrants who've been bused to Chicago from Texas in the last year. They say the city is violating codes by housing migrants in some locations, and they call on officials to find better housing than police stations.
And this is as buses are coming in last night and today, as has been reported. Legislative workers of the Illinois General Assembly might soon get the opportunity to form unions. Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch introduced legislation today allowing legislative staff members to collectively bargain and form a union. This comes after a group of workers in the Speaker's office formed what's called the Illinois Legislative Staff Association, asking to be recognized as a union.
Longtime community activist and former Chicago Board of Education member Joyce Chapman has died. Chapman was appointed to the board last year by then-Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but she had also served as the vice chair of the Neighborhood Housing Services Board and president of the Gately Park Advisory Council. She'd also been beat facilitator in the Chicago Police Department's 5th District. In a statement, Mayor Johnson says, as a far South Side organizer, Chapman, quote, worked tirelessly to unite her community and to bring all people together. Joyce's impact reverberates throughout every corner of our city. There's more of this story on our website.
And coming up in the program, what to know about a dreaded invasive species that has recently landed in Chicago.
But first, our Spotlight Politics team on today's confirmation of Chicago's new top cop, right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Chicago has a new police superintendent. Plus, city council members explore reopening mental health clinics, and that as more buses carrying asylum seekers arrive in Chicago. All that and much more in tonight's Spotlight Politics. Welcome back, Heather Sharon and Paris. So, obviously, big news of the day, the new superintendent unanimously approved at a special city council meeting. Heather, Snelling got 5 standing ovations, and Alderman Hopkins told him, quote, "Don't squander the moment." Talk about the support he has, though, and also the huge job that Larry Snelling faces.
He received plaudits across the political spectrum, not just from Alderman Hopkins, who's on the more conservative side, but also more progressive alder people who are really sort of concerned not so much about locking up criminals, but reorienting the department, which of course has been beset by decades of misconduct scandals and brutality, and has not shown an ability to comply with a federal court order to police constitutionally and protect the rights of Black and Latino Chicagoans. So it is just a massive undertaking. But what we heard from Snelling today was that his highest priority is restoring the department's morale after admittedly some of the toughest years of in policing, and that he wanted officers to know that he's got their back.
As usual, Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, blunt in her assessment of the pressure on the new police superintendent. Take a look.
Because right now they want y'all to be these magical Negroes that wave your wand and fix everything that's been wrong for decades. And it's wrong. And I'm going to call it like I see it. Y'all know how I am.
We know how she is. Magical Negroes. That's something to unpack another time. Paris, can he be the one to turn the ship around, though?
Well, that's what everybody across the spectrum, as Heather said, hopes. Clearly, the police accountability body that selected him as one of its finalists believes that. Clearly, Mayor Johnson believes that. I was kind of struck today, though, that the bulk of his speech, or some of the more powerful moments in his speech, focused on sort of defending the police officers, saying like, hey, I'm for police accountability, but hey, let's do it fairly. And you know, everyone gets up and protests when there's a police-involved shooting, but what about when a 1-year-old is shot? You kind of get an idea of why the FOP liked him very much. He really got up there and defended cops. It's interesting because Mayor Brandon Johnson elected on sort of a police accountability platform. That was sort of the phrase that was operative here. And I wonder how more progressive alder people felt about this speech, focusing more on defending the police and backing them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be potentially a problem for Snelling because, unfortunately, it's simply not true. There are plenty of protests when there are tragic killings of young people. There are dozens of protests organized by Black people, organized by Latino people against violence. And I think that he now has to sort of not only sort of build trust within the police department, but he's going to have to build trust on the city council, as any new superintendent would. And I think this potentially makes it a little bit harder for him, especially considering the fact that he has not emphasized efforts to reform the department since his nomination over a month ago. And that, I think, we have to sort of see that as a strategic approach at this point. I pressed him on what he would do to sort of implement the consent decree, which I reminded him is just 5% complied with, and he couldn't give me a figure that he wanted to see in a year, but that he was pledging to work diligently to increase that compliance. But how long does he have before those problems continue to sort of bloom?
All eyes on him. Obviously, a lot of, one of the toughest jobs to have in the city of Chicago. City Council Committee approved a panel to explore reopening mental health clinics and to have alternative response teams to respond to mental health 911 emergency calls. Paris, remind us about why the city's mental health clinics are closed.
Well, this happened under the Rahm Emanuel administration. His administration closed 6 of the 12 existing mental health clinics. Then he said it was a cost-cutting measure. I think his administration said at the time that there wasn't a whole lot of traffic to some of these clinics. I'm not sure if that's the case. There wasn't really any measurement of what happened to folks after those clinics closed. Did more wind up in jail because of mental health crisis? We don't know. Under the Lightfoot administration, they took a different approach. They didn't reopen those clinics. Instead, they contracted out to community organizations. And there were people in the mental health community that said this is an okay approach, this does work, but more progressive and democratic socialist alder people said no, it's got to be city-run clinics. We need to open those 6 clinics. It's been a key plank in the progressive platform for a long time, but clearly today, with this budget deficit the mayor's facing, he's giving himself a little bit of runway to get this done.
That's right.
Heather, is the new CPD superintendent, is he on board with these alternative response teams?
He is. He sees one way to restore officers' morale is to take things off their plate. Officers, I don't think, relish responding to calls from people who are suffering mental health crises. They want to make sure that they get the right help, and a lot of times police officers aren't the right person to provide it. And so Snelling has endorsed the sort of so-called treatment not trauma approach. The big question, as always, is how do you pay for it? And that, I think, is what this working group is designed to sort of craft. And at the same time, Johnson can sort of say, look, we're working on it, we're developing a plan, without sort of putting hard dollars to it in his budget proposal, which we will get in exactly 7 days.
So city's also reportedly dealing with another 7 buses of migrants, as Paris mentioned earlier, that arrived yesterday. More coming today. Heather, where are all these folks going to go?
Well, they are going to O'Hare Airport. They are going to police stations across the city. The city's shelters are full, even as Mayor Brandon Johnson has opened a new shelter nearly every week that he has been in office. There just simply isn't enough space for them. And that's why he said today that the city needs to open base camps or tent cities, essentially, to house the people who are now living in the police stations before the weather turns. Where those tents will be and exactly how they will be run, I think, are the 2 big questions.
And we know that some older people are pushing back against the $29 million contract that the city has signed about that. Heather, Alderman Anthony Beal, though, wants a vote on whether Chicago should remain a sanctuary city despite the strain on city services, the division in neighborhoods. Would this city council make that change?
No, frankly. The welcoming city ordinance has frankly nothing to do with caring for the migrants. The welcoming city ordinance, making Chicago a sanctuary, is designed to prevent the city's police department and other departments from working with federal immigration agents and deporting people. So even if Chicago was not a self-declared sanctuary city, the migrants would be here, and it would be incumbent upon the city to care for them.
And I thought the city wasn't headed in.
And so the issue is frankly larger than that. I think that this is sort of seen as a symbolic measure by Alderman Anthony Napolitano and other more conservative older people as a way to sort of push back on sort of this sense that Chicago is welcoming these migrants. And Mayor Brandon Johnson was asked about it today, and he said Chicago will continue to be a welcoming city, and, quote, I don't flinch.
Don't flinch, the man says. Paris, U.S. House of Representatives, the Judiciary Committee held a field hearing here yesterday in Chicago on violence, and Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx calling it a clown show. Tell us why.
Well, basically because they're calling Chicago a clown show, and they're calling any quote-unquote Democrat-run city a clown show, and they're calling Kim Foxx, one of these progressive or liberal prosecutors, a clown show in so many words. And so she's kind of barking back here. You know, they did have this hearing led by the controversial GOP Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, who's basically backed Trump through thick and thin despite 90-plus indictments. Not too interested in law and order on that, but he is apparently interested in law and order in the city of Chicago. They're going around to these different cities to sort of hold these hearings. I mean, they're pretty staged. The witnesses that they have come up they know they're going to be friendly to their point of view. I think the Sun-Times did a nice rundown of some of the lack of facts and some of the claims that were made. So again, I mean, it's their view that it's, you know, the Democratic policies, liberal policies that are leading to higher crime here. We should note that murders and shootings are down, carjackings are up.
Okay. All right. We'll have to leave it there. Plenty to talk about as usual. Spotlight Politics with Heather Schroen and Paris Schatz. Thanks, y'all. Up next, a dreaded invasive species lands in Chicago. What to be on the lookout for right after this.
Good thing it's not flip-flop weather anymore, although it might be next week. A new invasive species called the spotted lanternfly has landed in Chicago, and officials are telling residents to stomp and squash if they come across the bug. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more. So Patty, tell us about the spotted lanternfly and where in Chicago they can be spotted.
Well, right now, we've confirmed that they are in the Fuller Park neighborhood. The Illinois Department of Agriculture confirmed that. Some other media outlets have also reported Lakeview, and I've even seen an iNaturalist report of Prudential Plaza. So this is an invasive pest from China that was first found in the U.S. in 2014 in Pennsylvania. it's been making its way west ever since.
They're not that ugly, but was it kind of a surprise to everyone that they showed up here?
No, you have officials, state, local, federal, IDNRs, across the country who've been just watching this move from Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan. We were just kind of on the march. So that's the good news, is that they're actually prepared for it. It didn't come as a surprise.
So why does this little pest strike such fear into the hearts of agriculturists?
It's a sap sucker, and it likes to feed on trees that produce stone fruit, but it will also feed on oaks and maples. So the concern originally was for like cherry and peach trees and things like that, that it can weaken the trees, and then maybe some other pest can knock them out. But it's not a killer in the same way of like emerald ash borer per se.
And I was just going to say, we've had the emerald ash borer, and now this. So how healthy are all our trees throughout the city and state, our beloved tree canopy here?
Well, that is the thing, that this is not going to hit it like some other pathogens. I spoke with Stephanie Adams, who is a plant pathologist at Morton Arboretum. She said there is no reason to panic. This is not a killer. But more than anything, we as humans could find it a nuisance. If you've seen any of the video coming out of places like Pittsburgh, where it's just massive volumes. She said it can be quite startling because it looks like a trunk is just crawling, and they can be covering sidewalks. So she said there's definitely can be a yuck factor to these.
They matriculated everywhere, so they're literally telling people to stomp and squish on, basically kill these things?
If we all do our part and get rid of them, it won't get to the point that it's gotten to in a place like Pennsylvania, where it had time to multiply before anybody even detected it or knew what they were looking at. So we can do our job by squashing the adults, identifying the juveniles, which we will have photos of on our website, and also know what the eggs look like. Because if you can get the eggs, then you've killed the next generation of them. And they can literally lay their eggs anywhere, on your mailbox, on your garbage dumpster. They come in on things like wooden pallets, which is one way that they get transported across the country, because they jump from railroads onto the tree of heaven, which is a very invasive plant that lines, railroads, jumps off, immediately finds something to eat on. So we kind of have a dual pest invasion going on here. So get rid of tree of heaven, get rid of the eggs, stomp the adults, stomp the juveniles.
Gosh, they're sneaky little
buggers. Come on, Chicagoans, we can do it.
They just ride the rails across the United States?
They're little hobos.
All right, well, rest in peace to the spotted lanternfly. Sorry we have to kill all of you, but Patty Wetley.
Welcome.
Welcome, now you have to die.
Now you have to die.
All right, Patty, thank you as always.
Thanks,
and you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Last month was Earth's hottest August on record, but the heat isn't just impacting the atmosphere. It's having an impact on the ground beneath our feet. New research from Northwestern University illuminates the phenomena of underground climate change, and it's giving Chicago's Loop that sinking feeling.
If you blink, you'll miss them. Dozens of tiny temperature sensors set up underground in the Millennium Park train station.
25 degrees Celsius.
25 degrees Celsius. And I can do the conversion, probably 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
The sensors record the subsurface temperature every 10 minutes. Northwestern engineering professor Alessandro Rocha-Loria analyzes tens of thousands of readings every day. The data points to a phenomenon occurring below the ground. Above ground, the climate is warming. Beneath the surface, temperatures are rising as well, some years by as much as ½ degree Celsius. It's felt most acutely in so-called subsurface heat islands, like this train station.
When trains break, they release heat, at least most of the trains. Lighting systems release heat. We humans produce heat. So all of that adds up, and it produces heat.
Where does it go then?
In the ground. So you can consider that around any underground structure, such as a basement or a tunnel, there is you could call it a bubble of heat forming.
Loria says the heat causes the soil and construction materials to deform. That's making the ground beneath the loop sink by a few millimeters every year. But fear not, Loria is not predicting catastrophe just yet.
I am convinced of the fact that we're not talking about the potential collapse of structures, but potentially functional problems. Problems related to excessive settlement, angular distortion of structural members, tilting, and potentially cracking.
Loria and his team initially set up 150 subsurface sensors in all in big public spaces like the train station and Millennium parking garage, as well as in the basements of 30 buildings where boilers can significantly impact the subsurface temperature. Loria says his research offers an opportunity for engineers to build more efficiently.
We could absorb at least a part of that heat, bring it, if you want, upstairs, or in any case in buildings and infrastructures, and use it for space heating and hot water.
He says that could lead to significant reductions in a building's heating bill. And he says Chicago is not alone. London, New York, and any densely built urban area is undergoing the same phenomenon. And he says those cities should address the problem before it gets worse.
The study predicts that underground temperatures will continue to rise between 0.1 and 2.5 degrees Celsius every decade. And now, Brandis, back to you.
Paris, thank you. An award celebrating accessibility in the arts recently was given out to its 2023 recipients. It's an annual award presented by Arts Midwest for Midwestern artists with disabilities. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to this year's only Chicago recipient.
Visual artist Matt Beaudet's work gives him a voice.
That sort of power given back to me, and it, I think, was that moment of transition for me.
That power Beaudet is referring to comes as a result of hard work after being diagnosed with what's described as an invisible disability.
When we have discussions about disability, you're right that it's very often these visible disabilities that get a lot of attention, as they should. So then what happens is the invisible disabilities, it's harder to believe sometimes. And that's what that stigma that exists behind mental health is, because people pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work through the sadness, man up, right? Like there's these notions of we should just be able to move beyond it because you can't see it. Diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. So it's sort of a two-part, it's like winning the lottery of mental health. It's this, you get this mixture of schizophrenia and a mood disorder. So for my case, it's severe depression. So I was diagnosed with it after a series of misdiagnoses. I'm trying to work through what's going on. It was probably about, I think, 18 years ago now.
Beaudet says Chicago's community of other disabled artists helped him to find a space to heal through his work.
I was working with a counselor and a psychiatric team, and they did encourage me, since I was making art before, they encouraged me to use it to start to talk about, because one of the things that is most difficult for me when I'm in my worst state is I lose the ability to speak. And I can no longer verbalize a lot of things. And so from their end, they wanted me to start using art to talk, to share what my experiences are like, but in a visual form that maybe I'm more comfortable with.
That experience was growing up in the church.
I grew up in a very religious environment as well. And when I was really young and first diagnosed, there were even doctors at the time who were telling me I needed to repent of my sins. I needed to do the religious thing, which had no role in what I was experiencing, and so that became very problematic as well.
With the help of oil paint on clayboard, Beaudet brings his experiences to life, hoping to spark conversation celebrating disabilities, both visible and invisible.
Religion still comes into the work, but I see it a little bit more critically. The figures that I use in work are often religious figures who, under a different umbrella, would be considered insane. And so I can pull up these sort of stories, these histories that have been handed down to us and evolved through visual art, and then I can pose the question again of, okay, So this person heard voices, they talked to birds, they danced in the street, they did all the things that would get them institutionalized today. Why do we venerate them, but at the same time not treat the people in our world now who might be experiencing similar things? Why can we not treat them with the same humanity? Everybody experiences madness differently. And certainly for some people, the psychiatric ward is helpful. Medications are helpful. They may need that. And so to categorically dismiss the power of art would be problematic.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Each awardee received $3,000 to help elevate their work. Baudette's work is on display in a new exhibit at the Artress Gallery on Diversey Avenue. You can visit our website for more information.
That's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.